In Victoria, the government's just putting in legislation this week, quite dramatically, to expand access to euthanasia. And why it's interesting and why it relates to faith is it seeks to strip away the religious conscience of medical practitioners who right now in the current law do not have to participate in euthanasia if it is against their beliefs. That will go. They'll be forced to participate in euthanasia. And there's a second element. Up until now, under the current law, if you have a terminal illness and you want to end your life, you have to raise euthanasia with your doctor. Well, under these proposed changes by Victorian Labor, your health practitioner can suggest it to you. So you are terminal, you are at your most vulnerable, and someone you trust, your medical advisor, your doctor, your nurse, your palliative care specialist, they will be allowed to say to you, why don't you just end your life? Come on, make it easier on your friends and family. What do you think about these changes?
Well, Peter, these are very, very profound and troubling issues. It is relevant to that recent book we talked about of mine, How Christians Can Succeed Today, Reclaiming the Genius of the Early Church, because the early Christians stood against all these kind of practices in ancient Rome and ancient Greece, killing old people, killing unwanted infant babies, girl babies in particular, but also handicapped children. We're seeing a massive movement across the West to marginalise human nature, to trivialise human nature. And what the Victorian legislation is doing is trivialising the human condition by saying, why don't you just get out of the way? If you're an old person and you've got dependents who need your resources and you're feeling a bit unwell, why don't you just get out of the way? Now, of course, they're saying you still have to be in extremis, but everywhere in the world where we've seen euthanasia legislation introduced, there has been a progressive weakening of the safeguards. We know older people who come from a generation where duty was much more emphasised than narcissism as it is today, already feel guilty about the amount of care and attention that they need from their families. And so if this was meant to be a procedure in extremis for people in terrible distress who cry out to their medical practitioners and family and say, I can't bear this suffering anymore, please release me from it. Instead, it now becomes a menu of options. You have, okay, here's palliative care, here's pain control and so forth. And the other thing is, human psychology is that you need help over the moments of peak distress. So if a person is having a bit of distress, and you say, well, you can end this all by killing yourself and we'll help you. Well, I mean, this is absolutely appalling. And then the other side of it, removing the right of people with conscience, people with issues of conscience, doctors, nurses and other practitioners to refuse to participate in these kill teams is outrageous. And I think the Christian churches should hold big demonstrations at their hospitals, should go down to the front of the Parliament. I'd like to see the Catholic and Anglican archbishops leading demonstrations on the steps of Parliament. They are being forced to kill people needlessly who shouldn't die, and inevitably that will put pressure on innocent people who don't want to die, and they ought to take a very strong stand on this publicly.
All right, I'll leave it there, Greg. But of course, if people are watching at home and you feel strongly about this, please call your Victorian politician and tell them what you think. We'll leave it there. As I said, Greg, thanks for joining me tonight.